What is up, guys? Prickly Cactus here. Thank you so much for stopping by, and today we have all 6 people using the brand new Deathbringer Exotic Rocket Launcher, and we're taking it through the entirety of the Last Wish raid and ranking its performance on each encounter. How can this new Shadowkeep Exotic fare in the largest raid in Destiny's history? Well, let's find out. So, first things first, let's take a look at this weapon's exotic perks. Now, intrinsically, it has Dark Deliverance. Fires remotely detonated projectiles that drop void orbs on enemies. Hold shoot to fire, release to detonate. That is, it's already pretty unique, unlike most rocket launchers out there, let's just say. But it also has another unique perk, Dark Descent. The further a void orb falls, the more powerful its detonation becomes. Essentially, you want to shoot this thing as high above an enemy as you can, and then let those void orbs fall and fall and fall, and then when they finally hit that enemy, they're going to be at their maximum potential. But does that really work? Like, how many bosses really allow you to make the most of that? Well, let's start here with Kalli in the first Last Wish encounter. Now, this is actually pretty interesting because it turns out that Kalli, when she spawns in, she's kind of under a little bit of an object. And this is already going to be the start of many problems with this gun. It turns out that to actually perfectly set up the void falling projectiles, it's harder than you may think. And when you do, when everything goes right, it doesn't do that much damage. It's not like it absolutely destroys the boss. As you can see, you're kind of just doing decent damage, reasonable damage, but nothing absolutely insane. Now, very importantly, when we're damaging her, there's a couple of different things going on. Number 1, there's a visual glitch. Number 2, there seems to be some kind of actual glitch. And that's because when you're trying to use this thing, sometimes the bullets just disappear. Like, you shoot above Kalli's head, you release it, and nothing happens. The main ball that goes out just disappears. Sometimes the bullets will appear later. You can see very faint streaks if you really pay attention of the bullets that actually do appear. That is what I believe is a visual glitch. Like, your rocket launcher is still working. It's just perhaps that all 6 of us are using it and the game is kind of freaking out and doesn't know what to do. So it doesn't really render the orbs that you really obviously see, but you can see the faint traces and they still do damage. But sometimes your orb just straight up disappears. Now again, either that's a glitch, I don't know what's going on there, because it doesn't seem like we're shooting it that far above her head. Or number 2, the problem with this gun is that it actually does have a ceiling. It has a cap. It has a range. And even though Dark Descent would have you believe like you want to just shoot it straight up at the roof, you actually can't. Like, it will disappear. The orbs that spawn will not fall indefinitely. You do actually have a set distance that you can make this thing work, which is definitely a big downside. In any event, I thought I would take a little bit of extra time to mention some of the weirdness with this weapon now because, as you can imagine, it's going to come up in the boss fights going forward. But overall, this weapon honestly did not impress. The damage is nothing to, like, completely make fun of. Half health pretty easily, but after that point, everyone is out of ammo, even with rocket launcher reserves. And that means I'm going to give this thing a 5 out of 10. It's average. It's certainly not terrible, but certainly not excelling anywhere either. In any event, it is time to move on to the second Last Wish encounter against Shiro Chi. So the big question here, like, the damage wasn't that great. Can this thing actually stun her before Shiro Chi wipes the team? Because you have to do 1/6 of her health, or again, you just lose. So we set up all using the Deathbringer, and oh, wait a second, it actually worked, and it actually worked pretty darn well. Turns out this thing, especially when Shiro Chi is kind of just in this open auditorium, I don't know what you would call this thing, but there's no pillar directly above her head, it's a lot easier to just shoot above her, release it properly. You're not getting those glitches and those failing rounds that you were a lot more often on Kalli, so she's actually pretty easy to get to that stun just with the Deathbringer, as you can see. And also, it's not like we were exhausting all of our ammunition on that first stun to desperately get it either. Like, we shot 2 to 3 rounds each and stunned her very easily, and then just moved to the next one, 2 to 3 rounds each, and at that point, you may be struggling for ammo, unless you get taken armaments. In fact, later in the next run we did for a different weapon, I did get the Armor 2.0 version of taken armaments, which is fantastic. Like, that's gonna make it so much more plentiful in terms of ammo if you're using a heavy like this. But yeah, this thing, honestly, impressed. Like, it pretty easily stuns her. It's not bad. Like, if you do see an extra heavy ammo brick on the ground and you think, oh, you know what, I can definitely shoot a few extra rounds at some adds, it's not bad against those adds either. Like, every single one of those orbs, if one orb hits a group of thrall, it kills all of them. So it can just wipe an area of adds, which are very plentiful in this encounter. And therefore, I'm gonna give the Deathbringer in this encounter an 8 out of 10. Certainly above average, not even that bad, and for a meme, you can definitely run this thing and still get through it, but to be honest, like, for a 9 or a 10 out of 10, you could probably just use a very powerful shotgun and make things a lot easier on yourself. Okay, moving on from there, we have the third encounter against Morgoth. This is actually really interesting, because you may be thinking, well, you couldn't even kill Kalli, I bet you can't even kill Morgoth. But Kalli takes extra crit damage to her face, so snipe rifles and stuff that actually can crit are really good, but Morgoth doesn't really have that. Kind of has that big crit spot, but that means it's generally a lot easier to take this guy down with splash damage weapons, which this definitely is. Now, in the first part of the encounter against adds, if you do get ammo, it's actually pretty good, especially when you have the eyes of Riven spawning. Like, they spawn with a bunch of scions, you shoot above where they spawn, they kind of stick to those certain areas, and then it rains down and kills, usually or substantially hurts the Eye of Riven, and then kills all the scions around them. So it's not bad against the adds, but because it's a rocket launcher, because you only get a pretty small amount of shots, you're really trying to conserve all of your ammo for that damage phase. And for that damage phase, we set up a little bit differently. We're going to drop it right above him, and we're going to rain down and get all this damage right. Well, it didn't work out like that at all. The weird part was that every time we try to set up a perfect Dark Descent damage phase and we think we're doing everything right with this weapon, it never works out. Like, in this example against Morgoth, our bullets are constantly disappearing. Every second shot does no damage, seemingly. And that's either because we're too far away, but just like looking from this encounter, after reading the perks, this is exactly what you would think this weapon should do, but it just doesn't do anything properly. Now, it's also potentially because Morgoth is shooting out those void projectiles, and the Deathbringer projectiles are seeking onto those instead of him. That's a possibility as well, but it's just really frustrating to use. So, we tried again, because we're insane. And this time, as you can see, things went a lot better. Like, way better. In fact, we almost did get the one phase, and I'm confident we could have got the one phase, because if you look at the damages here, you can see just how crazy inconsistent this is. I got nearly 1 million damage, and then we had someone with 250,000 damage. And I asked him, like, what, are you just not shooting your weapon? He's like, no, I'm shooting it every single time. My bullets are just disappearing. So his big mistake was just trying to make Dark Descent work, I guess. Like, shooting it a little bit above that cap, or again, he's having the glitch where it just disappears. I don't really know. But if he had done a little bit more damage, we definitely could have one-phased him, and that's really the thing. The reason I was capable of doing the most damage in this damage phase is that I completely ignored all the Dark Descent crap. I just popped that thing as soon as I can, like right next to him, which is really funny. So that's the most effective way to use this weapon, is by pretending Dark Descent doesn't exist, because it's so glitchy when you try to set it up. In any event, this thing was actually capable of doing pretty reasonable damage against Morgoth. However, it's extremely inconsistent, and that has got to subtract points. So overall, I'm going to give this thing a 6 out of 10. Definitely above average, could perform like an 8 out of 10, but could also perform like a 4 out of 10. So that's the issue there. But we've got to move on, and the next encounter is the Vault encounter. And this one's interesting because there's no boss fight. There's no big boss DPS. We're using this weapon against ads. So, how is it here? Well, turns out when especially the Eye of Riven is spawning, or when you have like this room full of ads, you can just pop it kind of at the top of the room. It'll rain down and clear it out. Fantastic against the smaller ads. But of course, we do have the knights that we need to take care of. And against these guys, this thing's super weird and super funny to use because, as you can see, there are several times where you hit the knights and they just go flying with this thing. Like, they legitimately fly across the map, and then they kind of like move around and start to go back to the plate, and then like 6 of the dark orb projectiles will all come out of nowhere on the side of your screen and hit them from where you originally shot. Now the thing is, when that happens, and especially when it works right, if you kind of shoot more above them and it rains down, you actually do a decent amount of damage per shot with this thing. You actually do have a pretty effective weapon to use against these knights. Because one shot will generally do half to more than half of their health, and then you can just finish them up with a shotgun very easily. Not to mention, when you start to get used to the fact that you can kind of shoot the ground beside them and it just blows them away, you can have a lot of utility for this because, oh no, a knight has just come out near my plate from the dark barrier. I'm going to shoot beside him, blast him to the other side of the room, and then he's going to make his way all the way back to that plate. So you've got a lot more time than you usually do to deal with these knights. So that utility is actually like, surprisingly, it's something we definitely didn't expect, but it came up quite a bit. So great against the ads, does a decent amount of damage, has a weird force field utility, and so overall, this thing actually, in this encounter, I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. Like, I loved using it in the vault. But we've got to move on to the next encounter against Riven, the final boss of the Last Wish raid. And this is the big damage phase, and obviously, we going for the cheese. Let's just see how much damage this thing can do. And to be honest, guys, we were expecting absolute catastrophe. This thing has like 6 different exploding projectiles. We're gonna hit her eye, right? Like, you're just gonna trigger an eye accidentally and cause a wipe. Well, does it work like that? As you can see, no, it doesn't. For whatever reason, obviously we're shooting direct impact because like it's just not gonna work if we Dark Deliverance. But if we're shooting direct impact, for whatever reason, it hits and all of the void projectiles kind of explode in her mouth, and none of them, even when they fly outside and seemingly explode on an eye, they don't do enough damage, or they don't do any damage to pop it. It's very, very weird and confusing. But if you look at the damage numbers, they're pitiful. They're pretty bad. Like, a little over 300,000 was the best we could muster. Now, this is really interesting, actually, because we did, according to the health bar, about, a third to half of her health. Like, actually not that bad damage, and these are surprisingly low damage numbers. Like, for example, something like the Risk Runner did 700,000 damage, I believe, and that did around the same, like, 1/3 point of her health as this. So is there like extra damage because of these balls that's not popping up in the damage feed, like they do their own weird damage? Or has Riven's health been changed in Shadowkeep? I'm not 100% sure, but the damage numbers and the health bar, they honestly don't line up. It's a bit of a mystery. But, that's what we have so far. Obviously, nowhere near enough damage to actually cause Riven to be killed. And of course, we can't forget about the final encounter of the Last Wish raid, the Queen's Walk. And here, well, I got teleported pretty quickly, like I had to pick up the orb pretty quickly. And so I got to use it in the inside room, and it was actually pretty decent. In here, like, you do have the knights again, and as we said previously, pushes them around, does decent damage. There's also just a crap ton of other adds, and the Deathbringer's actually always been great against them, so really not that terrible. However, like, the amount of adds, especially the frequency at which the knights spawn, means that you're probably going to run out of ammo pretty quickly. But aside from that, actually performed pretty well, and the word from the guys on the other part of this encounter was that, yeah, it was actually pretty decent. Like, shoot it, you know, in the distance, kill all the adds, or kind of shoot it near you. Like, if you hit the ground, all those orb projectiles still come out. So there's a bunch of adds, shoot it kind of at the ground, all the orb projectiles come out and seek nearby enemies, wipe everyone around you, and then you just keep going. So actually not bad in this encounter. 7.5 out of 10. Ending on a bit of a high note. But we do have to then consider the overall ranking for this weapon. It's weird. Sometimes it was trash. Sometimes it was actually pretty decent. And overall, that means in my books, it gets a 6.5 out of 10. It's above average, that's for sure, especially when it works right. But part of the reason, even though it's doing the damage sometimes of a weapon ranked higher, is that the inconsistencies are there. It's really weird to use. It's hard to know when your bullets are going to work properly, and Dark Deliverance basically causes more harm than good in most damage phases. So overall, that's the ranking I'm going to give it. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, found it interesting. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. And if you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.